Ruling Truth Sports Network. I'm Sam McGinnis, one of your co-hosts for the show. I'd like to welcome on Sam Teets, our other co-host.
Yeah, it's great to be here, McGinnis. I'm glad we're doing the show this week, even though it's a little bit different than what we usually do.
Yeah, normally we're Friday at 9:30, but obviously that's New Year's Day, folks. Sam Teets isn't going to be in town.
No, I've got things to do. I'm not going to be around on Thursday at all for the NFL show or for anything else.
He's a busy guy. All right, we got a good show lined up for you today. We got some college football stuff since we got the semifinals coming up. We have Thinking or Dreaming second this time. A little bit of a new segment, player comparison. I might want to expand on this in the future, but right now we're just doing a couple of players. NFL news and predictions, and the number one thing me and Teets are looking forward to in 2020 in the sports world. Shall we get right to it?
Yeah, let's hop right in. I guess we're going to talk about college football first. This is more of my expertise than yours. I'm still going to make you make a prediction, though, for these games. So we have the semifinal games coming up.
I already know what I'm predicting on both of these, but let's hear everything you got first.
Anywhere first. We get the Rose Bowl between Alabama and Notre Dame. Not being played where it usually is. I think they have it in Texas this year because of COVID restrictions in California. And we have the Sugar Bowl between Clemson and Ohio State. And I told you before the show, it just came out within the past hour that Clemson, because I guess COVID-19, which you really wish that. I almost want to put all of Clemson's players in bubble wrap before the game because, like, we're just going to have this game no matter what. They're not going to reschedule because if players get COVID-19, they're not going to reschedule for a couple of guys. So I want to put everyone in bubble wrap before the game so there's no risk of any players getting COVID-19. Because if you're missing like Trevor Lawrence for the semifinal game for the national championship, you're basically screwed. So I'm hoping that it's just containing Tony Elliott. We don't have any other players get infected or kind of get sick. But just some background, Clemson has never lost Ohio State in the program's history, and they beat the Buckeyes last year in the semifinals as well. So it's a rematch game. I already know who I'm taking this game. I think you probably know. I'm siding with Clemson.
Yeah, I'm going to have to side with Clemson unless something crazy like Trevor Lawrence getting COVID happens. I will say, though, the last year with the whole controversy of the fumbling of the ball, do you think that would have made the difference in the game if they had overturned that? Or, pardon me, went the other way with the call?
No, Clemson's going to win regardless. Clemson's just a better program. They were a better program then. They're a better program now.
It's true. I'm not denying the validity of Clemson being a better team. I was just curious what you had to say about the call there.
I've never had anything against Ohio State. When Ohio State was back with Ezekiel Elliott, I was actually rooting for them for a little while to win some games. But since coming to Clemson, I've realized that as a Clemson fan, you hate maybe two or three teams. One of them is South Carolina, the Gamecocks, and the other one is the Ohio State Buckeyes. You hate both those teams with a burning passion. And frankly, I've got to hear from some Ohio State fans on Twitter and stuff like that. So I think Clemson's going to win this game. I think they're going to win it by a landslide.
I'm not sure a landslide, but now we know Sam Teets is caught up in the rage of Twitter.
It happens. It happens sometimes for very few issues. But this is one of them where I just don't want to hear it about Ohio State. I think Trevor Lawrence is a vastly better quarterback than Justin Fields. I think that Clemson's defense is actually better this year because Ohio State doesn't have some of the dominant players that they've had in the past. Although Clemson's defense last year was still better than this year as well. I think it will come down to a matchup between Ohio State's running games. They ran really well against Northwestern in the Big Ten in the conference championship game. I think it will come down to their running game versus Clemson's run defense, which actually shut down Kyron Williams from Notre Dame in the ACC championship game. So it's going to be interesting to see how that matches up. I think that will be the deciding factor in this game.
Interesting. I think it's just a talent difference is what it is. And again, it reminds me more of the NBA this way. But yeah, I think I'll have to take Clemson. I'm curious about this. Let's think scores. I think this will definitely be an offense game. Thinking maybe 35-24 Clemson, something like that.
I'll say like 38-24 to me is a little more reasonable. It's the same score. But it's basically the same score. You think it's what it's going to be. I think it's going to be like a 14-point difference. Something like that. Somewhere in the range of 12 to 17 points is probably going to be the difference here. And I think there's a chance it's closer than that. There really is like a field goal. I think Clemson is really – I mean, you saw them demolish Notre Dame this past week. I think Ohio State is better than Notre Dame. But I think it's enough to say it's going to be like a Notre Dame or Ohio State win or a 3-point game. at the end. I think it's going to be more of a 2-score game towards the end of the fourth quarter.
So maybe like 10 or 14-point difference.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. I really don't see it being just a 1-score game. I think Clemson has a significant advantage over Ohio State this year. And speaking of a significant advantage, I think Alabama has an even greater advantage over Notre Dame than Clemson does versus Ohio State. I feel bad because Notre Dame played Clemson really well this year in their first matchup and actually won double overtime. To me, it's just there's such a difference here. Alabama's just such a better program, more talented program. I don't think there's any way that Clemson could lose.
Yeah, no. If they lose, it's going to be their fault, not Notre Dame winning. It's going to be a mistake.
Absolutely. They had the players. Yeah, and Alabama has 2 Heisman candidates, and Devonta Smith, the wide receiver, and Mac Jones, the quarterback. So you have 2 Heisman candidates. 2 of the 4 Heisman candidates are on your team. You should win this game. You should definitely at least make it to the national championship.
At least.
I think Alabama wins this one. I think this one's going to be like a landslide. This is going to be Alabama's going to score 45 to like 53 points or something like that, and Notre Dame might get like 21.
45 to 10.
I don't know if it'll be 10. I think at some point Notre Dame has to luck into like maybe shots. I think they're going to get 14 to 21 points, but I think Alabama will still just smack them with like 50-something points. It's going to happen. I feel bad for Notre Dame.
Yeah. It's
they
just
have some underrated players.
It's the unfortunate power difference sometimes in sports we see.
Yeah, that means we're going to have the Clemson versus Alabama national championship game yet again, and if our predictions come true. But we'll get more into that later. I think right now, just picking the semifinal games is enough. So we're leads into some of my questions for you in thinking or dreaming our night here, where we basically give each other a statement or question, and we see if it's thinking or if it's just unrealistic, if it's dreaming. So I'm going to start off giving you the one that kind of ties into what we just talked about. We'll get a 4th national championship edition of Clemson versus Alabama. Is that thinking or dreaming?
Oh, that's 100% thinking. If both those teams don't win, there's going to be a problem. Because Clemson should win, but there is a potential you could see where that doesn't happen, but it's less likely. Alabama, if they lose, again, we talked about that's going to be their fault, not Notre Dame's fault. And even if they make big mistakes, they could still win that game. So the fact is, I think it's more than likely we see both those teams back in the championship.
Yeah, I would have to agree. That's why I put it down there, and that's why we've been talking about here earlier on the show. I believe it's almost guaranteed we're going to have a Clemson versus Alabama finals. And I really hope that's the case, because if we don't, I'm going to have to hear from Mike about how Clemson way to lose to Ohio State. I really just don't want to deal with that. That's something I want in my life right now. So I really hope that Clemson up there and mops the floor with the Buckeyes this coming week. But we'll figure that out in a little bit. Why don't you give me one of yours? What's one of your thoughts?
Well, hold up. Also, on that note, even if they do beat Clemson, they'll just get rolled by Alabama the next.
That's true. They will just get rolled by Alabama. I think Alabama is more talented actually than Clemson this year. I think they're more talented than Clemson. I just don't know to execute better than Clemson.
So here's an interesting one, and I'm going to add a little bit of a thing here to it, but James Harden will go to a worse situation than he is in, and that could even be a situation in which, and let me elaborate on this a little bit, in which he is actually the reason it gets worse, whether that's by culture or by team. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, where they go to he ends up on a team where maybe he just doesn't care, he's not interested in being there, and the team ends up performing worse than Houston Rockets are doing this year. I know what you're saying. I think you're right that if he gets traded, he's going to end up in a worse situation than he's already. Because that's a big caveat. He might not get traded at all, because frankly, very few teams what Houston's asking for. And I think I've said this before. Houston wants a young player who's going to be a core piece moving forward, and they want several first-round picks. There's not many franchises that have that kind of potential to make that deal happen. Maybe the Mavericks, but they're not going to give up Luka Doncic for him. Maybe the 76ers, but they're not going to give up Ben Simmons. So really you're in a situation where you don't have the options to him getting traded unless Houston really lowers the asking price, which I don't see happening. But if they did, I almost guarantee he'd be going to a worse team than Houston this year, a worse team than the 76ers, anyone like that, a worse team than the Mavericks. He'd go there. He'd probably be the lone superstar. And if he's disinterested in being want to play for the team, you can't sit out, because it's not like the NFL. You can't hold out. It doesn't really work that way in the NBA. Your contract just freezes. It doesn't continue to run. So he'll have to play. And he'll be so disinterested that maybe he'll still score 27 points a game because he's James Harden, but they'll end up losing a lot of games.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What's your next one?
So my next one, the NFL should return to its 16 playoff format next season. Now I'm talking, of course, this year they're having 7 teams get in. Usually it's 6, and with the 6 teams, you have top 2 seeds in each conference get a bye week. Should they go back to that format versus the new one they've employed this year?
So here's my thought. We're gonna start here. Why did they add an extra one in the first place? When I first saw it, I was like, there doesn't really seem to be a need for this. In the other leagues, it's like teams didn't finish seasons, so you can kind of see how it would make sense to add teams into the playoffs. I don't even see a reason the NFL needed to in the first place. It might be cooler, but again, there was no real reason for it. I feel like what was the point? You didn't need it. So I guess that might just be a going along with the trend kind of a thing. But I like bigger playoffs. So for me, this is actually dreaming. I'd prefer to have bigger playoffs, though I might adjust how the system works. But in all reality, they may have never needed to in the first place. So from that sense, it's dreaming. You get kind of a double answer there.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's any chance the NFL goes back to the old format. But part of it's going to be a 10-win team in the AFC that's not going to make the playoffs anyways. You can't say that it's watered down to the level of play that much because we have a 10-win team, at least one 10-win team in the AFC that won't make the playoffs. So you can't say it's watered down the competition. But at the same point, I do like the idea of the top 2 teams getting bye weeks. And I feel like in the future, there will be teams that will have the 7th seed that will have 7 or 8 wins. So to some extent, I like the old playoff format. I'm not sure how I feel about the new one yet because I haven't seen it play out yet. I kind of lean towards the familiar, and I know I was getting the old format.
Right. All right. This one's kind of a little different because Sam Teets isn't the NHL guy on here, but I'm curious what he has to say about this. So recently, it was found out that Kucherov, one of the best scorers, the best scorer on the Tampa Bay Lightning, is going to be out for the entire regular season. Tampa Bay, so here's the thinking or dreaming question. Tampa Bay will still win the division even without Kucherov.
Yeah, I mean, that's difficult. And I know I'm not the hockey guy, but I can even tell that will be very difficult without Kucherov because he was a Hart winner for the 2018-19 season. He's been at the top of the league in the past. And I know this year was not nearly as good as his previous season. Part of that is because I'm sure the number of games has been altered. There's been a bunch of stuff like that. COVID throws everything. But he was still by far the leading scorer for the Lightning. I mean, he had 85 points in the season. Next best was 66. So when you make that change, I just don't know because that's not just a rotational player that you can maybe replace or maybe hope someone steps up and fills that void. That is a superstar that you have to replace. So I don't think, even though it's a very talented team and a very deep team that's proven their value, at least last year, I don't think I could say they're going to win the division without some of that. And maybe they still will by a thinner margin. But I think you're considering the fact they might miss or might not win the division because they're missing their best scorer.
Well, I was saying they still would, but here's the question then. Do you think the Stars, who I think are the next team down from them in that division, could you see the Stars potentially passing them? This is going to be really interesting because remember, these 2 teams played in the Stanley Cup final, and now they're going to play each other 8 times, and they're both probably the best 2 teams in this division, so whoever comes out on top kind of gets a laugh.
I think that their Stars have a legitimate chance of doing that. And I think because they play each other so much, it's going to make Kucherov not being there even more prominent because you're going to have to see, can you hold off the Stars over and over again 8 times a season with how the new division setting up? But I don't think they're going to beat the Stars 5 out of 8 times. I think the Stars will probably get them to 4-4 or 5-3 because I think when you take out a player like that who has such an impact, it's very hard to replace a guy. Even with rotational players, even with young guys, I just don't see a way for the Lightning to stay ahead of the Stars in the long run. Now, maybe Lightning will still end up being the better team overall, and they still go farther in the playoffs. But I think the Stars will get a couple of games up in the Lightning and maybe inch the division very close. Maybe a 1 or 2 game difference here in the final records, but I expect it to be very close.
Yeah, I think for me, If you took Kucherov and Stamkos out, then I would be like, okay, the Stars are going to pass him, because though that's your captain and your leading scorer, and both of them are high-end scorers, one of them may not make the difference. Stamkos was gone for part of the Stanley Cup final, and they still ended up winning that, but he did come back for part of it, so remember that. So it's going to be tough without Kucherov. Nikita is a really good player, and again, like you said, won the Hart Trophy just a year back. So I could see this going both ways, but I might end up still going with the Lightning at number 1.
Well, you know more than I do, so you're probably the person to trust in this situation when considering who will win. Although I believe you picked the Stanley Cup wrong, if I'm looking at Stars to win.
Right? I did, yeah. So that was an interesting failure on my part. I do not like the Lightning much. So if what you said came true, it wouldn't hurt me as much.
All right, well, there you have it. Sam McGinnis hates the Lightning, but we'll get moving on here to our next segment. Some NFL news. Do you want to bring up the player comparison now, or do you want to wait until the end for
that? We'll wait to the end of the segment and then do it. It's just an interesting thing I saw, so I wanted to bring it up.
All right, so we're going to give you something new in a little bit. Let's start it off. We'll talk about who's playing, who's not playing this coming weekend. So Jared Goff and Cooper Kupp are not going to be available for the Rams, and they're still battling for playoff position, by the way, because they haven't won their past 2 games. They lost to the New York Jets and then the Seattle Seahawks. So the Rams haven't clinched a spot yet. They haven't clinched a spot in the playoffs yet.
If that's what does it for you, they could legitimately miss the playoffs because they lost to the Jets.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
the Cleveland Browns good too. The Browns haven't clinched a spot weekend if they want to get in. So right now, the Rams, who are at 9-6, they need to win to get in. They're playing the Arizona Cardinals, who are also battling for playoff position right now. They are behind Chicago even though they're 10 records, they both have 8-7 records. They're behind Chicago for the 7th seed in the NFC. So they need to win here against the Rams to get in. And it's a win-in situation for Arizona because they'll pass the Rams then in the standings. If Los Angeles loses and Chicago wins, the Rams are out of the playoffs. So you don't have your starting quarterback, Jared Goff, have arguably your best receiver, Cooper Kupp. That's going to be a very difficult situation. And Kyler Murray, the starting Cardinals, who is questionable with a leg injury, he is going to play. So the Cardinals have their starting quarterback. The Rams don't. Among other players getting rested, Steelers have already said they're going to rest Ben Roethlisberger, so he's not playing. They're going to start Mason Rudolph versus the Browns. The last time Mason Rudolph, I think, started against the Browns, he got his head bashed in. So that's going to be to see how that plays out. And Patrick Mahomes is not starting.
Turn off his TV and run and hide because he's not going to want to see Mason Rudolph again.
Yeah. I don't want to see Mason Rudolph. At the same point, if we've already committed to playing our backups and we somehow Browns and the Browns don't make the playoffs because they lost to Mason Rudolph, that would be a lot of fun. So I'm probably going to still watch the game and hope that Pittsburgh finds a way to win because I don't want the Browns in the playoffs. Also, other news, Patrick Mahomes is not going to be starting. They're going to play Chad Henne. The Kansas City Chiefs are. So we've seen Patrick Mahomes for the final time this regular season. The Chiefs, who have nothing to play for because they've already clinched the number 1 seed and the bye week in the AFC, are going to their backup quarterback. They probably will finish the year 14-2, if not 15-1. They're playing the Los Angeles Chargers in the final week. So a bunch of teams are resting their guys, obviously. There's some playoff implications here. Not everyone is selected. It'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out. And the biggest news, again, Mahomes and Ben Roethlisberger are sitting. Cooper Kupp and Jared Goff are out.
All right. So then it transitions to this then. Who do we think will secure these last spots?
All right, so let me set the situation here. In the NFC, we're still waiting to figure out who's going to win the NFC East. That's Washington's division. The Washington football team currently has a 6-9 record, and they had the division. The Dallas Cowboys are also 6-9. So if Washington loses this weekend and Dallas wins, Dallas gets in. If Washington wins, it's all over. Washington gets in. So Washington versus Dallas. Dallas plays the Giants, and Washington plays the Eagles. We don't know if Alex Smith is going to play for Washington yet. I think that's a big difference maker here in this situation.
Yeah, if Alex Smith plays, they have a much better chance of winning. But here's the thing. I like Jalen Hurts, so I think there could be a potential here where that changes the game here. And then if Dallas wins with Andy Dalton, Then somehow we watched the Cowboys.
Somehow the Cowboys get into the playoffs. I'm really pulling for Washington here. I don't want to see Dallas get in after all of this.
So our options are one of the worst fan bases in history getting into the playoffs, or a team that doesn't have a name.
Yeah, and with one of the worst owners in history getting into the playoffs. I don't know which one I want to pick for.
Yeah, pick your poison, folks.
I'd probably lean Washington just because. I would probably lean Washington just because Alex Smith and Ron Rivera, they're good guys. It's not their fault the owner is terrible. So I think Washington. Well, I'm pulling for Washington to win here and get into the playoffs. Looking through the other teams that haven't clinched yet, we already know who's coming out of the NFC South. It's the Saints and Buccaneers. The NFC West, I already ran you through. It's going to be the Rams or Cardinals are going to get in. The NFC North, the current 7th seed is the Chicago Bears. And they're playing the Green Bay Packers in the final week of the season. The Packers have something to play for. They're battling positioning here. Potentially get the number seed and lock that up. I don't see a way Chicago wins this game. I sincerely don't. I think Chicago's going to lose to Green Bay.
So here's what I think. I think it'll be a shootout, and I think Green Bay will win. I definitely actually see where there could be a possibility because here's the difference. The Bears could find themselves in a situation in which they don't win, and then they're out of the playoffs. So who's more desperate here? Playoff positioning or playoff spot?
Yeah.
You got to think about that at least. So I think there might be more motivation potentially for the Bears. So that might help them sneak in an upset here.
And the Bears are on a little bit of a hot streak. That's the only reason they've climbed back into the playoff picture to begin with. And again, it's going to come down to Chicago, the Rams, the Cardinals to kind of figure out who gets in here in these situations. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, the Rams hold the tiebreaker over Chicago. So if the Rams win, which means Arizona loses, Chicago's in. All Chicago needs is for the Cardinals to lose, and they'll get in.
Which is unlikely.
But if the Cardinals win, they beat the Rams. Arizona jumps the Rams in the standings. The Rams fall back, and they're tied with Chicago at 9-7, even if the Bears win. The Rams beat the Bears earlier this year, so the Rams get in. So basically, the only thing that cannot happen for Chicago, they cannot have the Cardinals win. If the Cardinals win, it's all over.
See, I think that's actually probably the most likely scenario with Goff and Kupp out.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, really, you expect Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals to go out there and win. But then again, they lost to San Francisco this past weekend with Nick Mullins as the quarterback, so you never know what could happen. There's always a chance.
Yeah.
And really quickly, we'll wrap it up here with the AFC. There's a bunch of 10-5 teams out there. So the Ravens are 10-5, the Browns are 10-5, Dolphins are 10-5, and the Colts and Titans are 10-5. So one of these teams is not making the playoffs. Right now, the Colts are on the outside looking in. They play the Jaguars, so they're probably going to win the final season. It comes down to the other 10-5 teams to figure out who's going to not get it.
I mean, if you think about those teams just on a basic level, you'd think the Browns or the Ravens would be the team you'd expect to not see in the playoffs.
No, I totally agree there. I think it would be one of those two teams. I think the Colts are not a great team. Like, I would probably take Baltimore to beat the Colts. I might take Cleveland to do it as well, but the Colts play, like I said, Jacksonville here at the end. So if any of the other 10-5 teams lose, and that includes Tennessee, Baltimore, Cleveland, if any of those teams lose, Miami as well, and the Colts win, then they're in with 11 wins, else gets knocked out. The Titans, they play the Texans, and the Texans might not play Deshaun Watson this week. It sounds like the Titans can get in as well, so we'll lock their spot up as long as they win. The Browns, they're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are starting Mason Rudolph, so they're probably going to win there as well. The Ravens, they're playing the Bengals. The Bengals have Brandon Allen as quarterback, so they're probably going to win. And the Dolphins, they play the Buffalo Bills, who have not said they're starting Josh Allen.
So if Josh Allen starts, it sounds like Miami is in the worst position here.
Oh, yeah.
Because the likelihood is, even though these would all have to be upsets, except maybe that one, the likelihood is still one of these teams are going to lose. So if you had to pick one of these upsets, which one would it be?
Well, if I had to pick one of these teams to lose, assuming Josh Allen's starting, I would say Miami, just because Josh Allen's an MVP candidate. He's torched a bunch of defenses here at the end. I would think Miami would be the team to lose. I don't think Miami's the worst 10-5 team in the AFC, but they have a terrible matchup this weekend. So I would think Miami would be the one that would end up losing. Go ahead.
I meant outside of the. I was talking about the upset of the other 10-5 teams.
Yeah. So out of the other teams, I don't see the Colts losing to the Jaguars. It's just not going to happen. The Jaguars want to lose pretty much, and they're starting Michael Lennon, so they're going to lose. I don't see Tennessee losing to Houston. That really leaves me with Cleveland losing to Pittsburgh and Mason Rudolph, or Baltimore losing to Cincinnati and Brandon Allen. If I had to pick one of those teams, I'm probably going to take Cleveland. I think Cleveland could lose to Pittsburgh this week because Mason Rudolph maybe has a little more arm strength than Ben right now, although Ben had a really good second half against the Colts. But Rudolph might have more pure arm strength. And frankly, if Pittsburgh can use second stringers to just knock Cleveland out of the playoffs, that would be a lot of fun.
That would be kind of hilarious. Yes, it would. Also, I just want to point it out because it doesn't happen very often. Mike was wrong.
Yes, he was, and he should know that he was wrong. And he should never have bet against the Steelers to begin with. Look, I picked Pittsburgh in every game this year. And in Steelers games, I'm 12-3 this year. So I'm pretty successful at picking the Steelers to win. I just haven't picked against them this whole season, and it's worked out pretty well. So I'm going to continue picking for them. Even this weekend, I'll still pick Pittsburgh.
That's like picking Kansas City to win every week. Well, of course, you're going to be right most of the time.
Well, yeah, but Pittsburgh's not as good as Kansas City. Come on, Kansas City's Super Bowl champs. Pittsburgh missed the playoffs last year because they had Devlin Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph at quarterback.
Duck Hodges, let's go.
Yeah, that was an interesting time. But anyways, we've wrapped up with our NFL content almost here. We want to go through some quarterback comparisons. You kind of brought this up as a new segment here. I'm going to flash two sets of stats across the board here. These are numbers from two quarterbacks who have played this season. So one started 6 games, 1-5. Another one started 12 games, 4-8. And you're gonna what's the deal? Are we gonna say which one we'd rather have, or are we gonna try to guess who these quarterbacks are?
So I want you, because you might know just based on the stats. You're a knowledgeable guy about this stuff. Who do you think these quarterbacks are? Okay, you know. Okay, right, so I want to throw something out there.
This one's
So this is
Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah, Dwayne Haskins. The other one's Drew Lock. And I saw something interesting fly over Instagram where somebody was thinking Dwayne Haskins might go to the Broncos. Look at these stats and tell me how different they are, and then remind me how good Drew Lock is. Like, why would you get a second quarterback that sucks? Because Drew Lock.
That's exactly the point here, McGinnis. Why would you go and take Dwayne Haskins when you already know he's terrible? And when you already know he's not accountable. Like, Broncos got mad at Drew Lock earlier this year because the quarterbacks had a meeting where they all got COVID-19. They had to start a practice squad wide receiver because the quarterbacks all were together. They all got sick. I think if you're bringing Haskins is worse than Drew Lock. He's more immature. He's a worse player to some degree. He makes poor decisions.
He's not an NFL quarterback is what he is.
Neither is Drew Lock. Like, I'm not going to say Drew Lock is better than Dwayne Haskins because honestly, they're both super bad. So why would you want to have either one of them on your team? If I'm Denver, I'm trying to get like Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, some of those free agents this year, or I'm drafting a guy.
Yeah, there are a few options you have. I think Carson Wentz might be one of your better ones, but then all those turnovers is a concern. But yeah, like flash those real quick across the screen again and really tell me how different these two players are, because it's like Dwayne Haskins is not an upgrade. He's like a downgrade by like – it's not a huge downgrade, but it's still a downgrade.
No, I would still consider Haskins a downgrade over Drew Lock. Like a minor downgrade. And part of that has to do with his off-the-field mentality and stuff he's done in the past. So it's not all bad per se, but there's a lot of stuff there that I don't like about Dwayne Haskins. Yeah, I don't think Dwayne Haskins is a starter. I don't want Dwayne Haskins in my locker. And frankly, I don't want Drew Lock as my starter either. And I don't want Drew Lock in my locker room right now because he's a second-round pick who people think could be starting on some teams right now. I don't want Drew Lock on my team because he's not a starter for my team. I don't want him as my starter. I don't want him as my starter.
Yeah, no, they've combined now. This you have to remind they've combined that they're on bad teams. But they've combined for what 5 and was that 13 record?
Yeah, 5-13 record where they've thrown for 19 touchdowns and 22 interceptions.
And their ratings are both in the 70s. That's bad.
Yeah, this is bad. I mean, it's not like for someone like Carson Wentz, at least you know he's played like an MVP level before. He's made a Pro Bowl in the past. You know he's played well in the past. Haskins has never played well at any point in his career. Drew Lock had 5 decent games as a rookie, and he hasn't played well at any other point other than that. So to me, there's no saying, well, these guys have shown the upside they're capable of doing this. Maybe Drew Lock's had maybe 3 or 4 games like that. Dwayne Haskins might have had 1 or 2, but that's not nearly enough to say this guy's worth bringing on board to compete for a starting quarterback gig. I don't want either of these guys around because I don't think they're starting quarterbacks.
Right. It would be like having 2 third strings competing for who the first string would be. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I think, to be fair, I think these guys could be second stringers because we've seen worse second stringers in the past. I just don't think that you want these guys potentially getting more open to a quarterback competition when they're not good enough to compete for a starting job. And primarily, speaking to like, there's a bunch of bad quarterbacks in the NFL right now. They're probably going to be replaced a lot when we get to free agency and the draft this year. But to me, like, these are 2 guys I don't want being my stars. I don't think they have much development in their future. Granted, I wasn't a big Josh Allen fan. He's turned into an MVP candidate, so you never know. I could be wrong. But I just don't see where these 2 guys have the upside of being starting quarterbacks.
Well, yeah, and again, part of that, and it's a curious thing. Think about all the quarterbacks that were in that draft of 2018. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, who are both the quarterbacks taken later in the first round, are the 2 that have had the most success. So
yeah, and you got Baker Mayfield who's done. Baker Mayfield's been okay. He's been up and down. He's been pretty good this year.
He's a starting quarterback.
He's been up and down. Yeah. Sam Darnold has the talent to be a starting quarterback, but he's a very bad team with a horrible coach. So I don't really know what to think about with him yet. And Josh Rosen's just a practice squad somewhere. I think actually got signed to San Francisco's active roster because of injuries at their spot, but whatever. He's basically a practice squad quarterback. I think the interesting quarterback draft is look at the QB class of 2019. So it's Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins, and then Drew Lock. Drew Lock was a second-round pick. So those are your top 4 quarterbacks in the draft. Haskins has already been cut. Daniel Jones does not look like a starting quarterback to me. Drew Lock doesn't look like a starting quarterback to me. The only good one from that class could be Kyler Murray.
Yeah. It's interesting. Part of this depends on what team you're taken from part of the time. And especially like we talked about this somewhat with Matthew Stafford, how much better would he be if he had gotten drafted by New Orleans or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. He could give you Sam Darnold being taken by the Jets. If Sam Darnold was in a better situation, if he was in the Chargers and all those weapons the Chargers have, if he was there, I think he'd be much better off right now than he is with New York. So situation does matter, and something quarterbacks need to keep an eye on when they're deciding whether or not they're going to go out into the NFL draft, or when they might be trying to force their way out of draft position so they don't get taken by a team like Washington or like the Jets or something like that.
Yeah. In other words, your guy from Clemson here, Mr. Flo, needs to give the Chargers and Jets bad impressions of himself so he can get taken later. Because neither of those teams.
Well, he's getting taken by Jackson number 1. The Jaguars do have some hope, though. There's some hope for the Jaguars.
It's very small.
It's very small. But there's a lot of money. There's a lot of free. They have a lot of cap space this offseason. They've got a lot of draft picks really high this year. So I'm hoping Jacksonville can actually put something together here. And they save Trevor Lawrence.
No, Trevor Lawrence is screwed. All right, let's move on to our last segment here, though.
Yep. So here we're going to talk about some of our hopes for 2021. The number one thing we're looking forward to in the sports world for 2021. And I guess I'll start it off here since my name's on top on our little script here. The biggest thing I'm looking forward to is fans returning to games. And I'm not just talking about football games. I'm talking about all sorts of sporting events, and not like 6,000 fans here or there. I'm talking about full stadiums. I would love to see that happen. I know people are starting to get vaccinated. I've had friends who work in the medical field who have been vaccinated. I've had aunts and uncles who have been vaccinated already. So we're hoping to reach some point where we can have large gatherings and have fans back in the stands, because really that atmosphere is just something that everyone misses. Like there's nothing like a playoff game at a home for basketball or for football where you just have that energy. You can't replicate that with giant TV screens with virtual fans or with 6,000 people versus like 80,000 people. You just can't do it. So I'm looking forward to having full stadiums again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, just this is mostly because I'm the NHL guy. I'm just looking forward to the new the new system the NHL is doing, because I actually really like it. I'm not sure I would want it as a normal thing, though, maybe, but I really just like a little bit of new structuring here for at least a season, and just the fact that we're getting one is nice. So
it's just
that's all.
The fact that you actually have a schedule is nice. Now you can finally latch onto something here, have some hope.
Yeah. Me and my buddy were looking at it because he's a Blue Jackets fan and I'm a Red Wings fan. And now that we're in the same division, we play each other 8 times. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be funny to see how that works out. Because it is very different now. You got teams playing each other, like I said, 8 times a year, which is something that we wouldn't have happening, especially teams that are playing now. You mentioned a few earlier. It's going to be fun to see how the new schedule plays out. And again, this is only a 1-year thing, but what happens if this is like really successful? What happens if everyone loves this? Is there any chance that it becomes a little more permanent, or are they just going to go back to normal and say, it's a 1-year thing?
I'm going to say they'll go back to a normal thing, but here's the thing. There is a new normal being restructured for this next season anyway. For those who don't know, the Seattle Kraken are entering the league, not this season, but the next season, and they were moving 2 teams around anyway. They were moving the Coyotes to the Central, and then the Kraken are going to the Pacific. So that's going to be the new normal anyway, so you're already having a little shift. I suppose there's some scenario where everybody loves this and this is the new thing, but I don't think so. I think that it'll end up going back to the normal minus 2 teams, which will have a new normal that is permanent.
All right. Well, I guess that's all we have for today, right, McGinnis?
Yeah, I think that's all we got.
Well, not quite, because I still have to do the promo for manscaped.com. So if you... So, hey, guys, hang in there just for a few more minutes here. We got the promo, and then we'll end the show. But a quick reminder to manscaped.com, use promo code TGT20 to get 20% off free shipping on your first purchase. Helps the show out. Helps us keep things afloat here. We really appreciate it if you use that. And, we need all the sponsors we can get, so we appreciate Manscaped reaching out to us and being a sponsor for this program. McGinnis, I can't believe I'm going to do this to you, but did you get anything from Manscaped for Christmas?
I did not, because I'm not crazy, dude.
Oh, what a shame.
Why would you ask me that, though?
I knew it was going to make you uncomfortable. Look, I didn't want to ask you. I knew it was going to make you uncomfortable, so I did it because I knew it was going to make you uncomfortable.
Hold up. Teets, did you?
No, of course I did. What are you kidding? Of course I did.
I'm sorry.
Maybe next year.
How bad would it be if somebody gave you something like that? Because
hey, don't hate on the sponsor. Don't hate on the sponsor. We're getting paid money here. Don't hate on the sponsor too much.
No. Like, sure, like if you want to buy that for yourself, but like for a Christmas present, I feel like that'd be really awkward.
That would be something that should be very strange to receive. I admit that.
Yeah. So like maybe buy that for yourself if you're like, if you want that, sure, do your thing. I don't care. But like, don't do that to like your spouse or something. That'd be really weird.
Yeah, that'd be a very pointed message there. But anyways, now that we've gotten to this point of the show, McGinnis is turning bright red. I think it's about time we wrap this up. Guys, we really appreciate you tuning in to listen to this edition of the Sam and Sam Show. We're probably getting our normal time next Friday at 9:30, but if something happens, I'm sure we'll let you know. Again, we cover all sports. We got a little bit of everything here. But we'll see you guys next week. We appreciate you tuning in today. For Sam McGinnis, I'm Sam Teets, and you've been listening to the Sam and Sam Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.